Welcome to Money Clearly, the podcast that explains everyday money without the mystery. I'm Bridget Gale, and each week we break down the money questions that come up in real life, at work, at the bank, and at home, so you can understand what's actually happening with your money. Today, we're talking about emergency funds, what they are, what they aren't, and why they matter. There's a particular kind of gut-wrenching, nail-biting worry that comes from thinking about money. For some people, money feels overwhelming, confusing enough that the instinct is out of sight, out of mind. Not because they don't care, but because looking too closely feels like proof that they're bad at this. So they avoid it. And even then, the pressure doesn't go away. For others, that same worry shows up in the opposite way. It comes from being hyper attentive, from paying attention all the time to your money flow, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. Different reactions, same pressure. Because you know what's coming, expenses. You're trying to plan for it, but your money always seems to already be spoken for. And it shows up in small, ordinary ways. You know the tires need to be changed. You're planning to handle that next month. But this month, the air conditioner went out in the middle of summer. So the plan shifted. You had to get the AC fixed. And then the tire blows out the same week. Nothing irresponsible happened. Nothing was ignored. The timing just collapsed. And suddenly, everything feels tight. You're checking the mail for your paycheck and rushing it straight to the bank. You're waiting until the absolute last minute to pay a bill, just to buy a little bit of time. You're looking for quarters in your sock drawer, changing the menu for the week, saying no to going out, not because you don't want to, but because the extra gas money just isn't there. At night, your mind keeps spinning. Will all the bills clear? What can wait until the next paycheck? What am I going to do if one more thing shows up? That panic doesn't come from poor choices. It comes from having no room for timing to be wrong. And if you've been here, that doesn't mean you failed at money. It means that you were carrying real responsibilities with no space for overlap. For most people, this worry shows up not as one big emergency, but as ordinary things arriving too close together. Bills that are always there, costs you expected, income you know is coming, just not in the order that you need it to. You're watching dates instead of amounts, clearance instead of totals, what posts first, what can wait a day. You're not guessing, you're tracking, and still the pressure builds. Because everything works only if nothing is early and nothing is late. There's no mistaken spending to point to, no unnecessary expenses to cut out, but still, day to day, there's the ever-present stress of knowing that if the timing slips even a little, everything comes unraveled. And that's where the confusion lives, because nothing went wrong, but nothing feels stable either. Money in and money out just don't arrive in the order you need them to. That's the problem emergency funds are responding to. Not mistakes, not poor planning, not a lack of effort. Emergency funds aren't about extras, they're about absorbing money interruptions. An interruption is what happens when money needs to leave before new money arrives. A bill shows up early, income shows up later, and the flow doesn't line up. An emergency fund is a buffer that softens the impact of an interruption. Some money set aside doesn't erase the problem. It gives it time. Time for the flow to catch up. Time for things to clear in sequence instead of all at once. Credit can delay the pressure, but it doesn't absorb it. It moves the timing problem forward instead of giving it somewhere to land. Without a buffer, interruptions don't stay contained. They spill. A small delay turns into pressure. Pressure turns into trade-offs, and trade-offs start cascading. One late arrival forces another decision, another delay, another compromise. Emergency funds interrupt that chain. They don't prevent emergencies. They prevent emergencies from multiplying. They turn sharp edges into pauses by extending time. That's what stability actually is. It's not having everything optimized. It's not being perfect, but it's having enough space that timing doesn't control the outcome. Here's the part that often gets missed. Emergency funds aren't about crossing a particular finish line. They're not about reaching a specific number. And they're not a test of whether you're doing money right. They're about breathing room, about creating enough space that timing doesn't get to decide everything. That's why even a small buffer matters. Not because it solves every problem, but because it keeps one problem from turning into 3. And that's why credit can feel helpful, but it never truly brings relief. It can delay the moment of impact, but whether it's now or later, the payment still has to be dealt with. So if you've handled emergencies before and still felt tense afterwards, that doesn't mean you handled them wrong. It means the timing pressure never really left. Emergency funds don't erase risk. They reduce how loud it gets. They don't make life predictable, but they make it survivable. Emergency funds aren't meant to carry your entire life forever. They're there to protect you when timing is tight and things collide more often. As life becomes more predictable, they don't have to do as much heavy lifting. Not because you've done better, but because there are fewer moments where everything hits at once. And how much protection someone needs depends on their life, their income, their obligations, and how exposed their timing already is. There is no universal number here. Everybody's going to have a different number that makes them feel more comfortable in an emergency. When you're first starting an emergency fund, you may feel that you need a lot more money than you actually do. What matters is stability, not completeness. And understanding that, seeing that the tension you feel comes from timing and sequence, not personal failure, is where relief begins. Sometimes that relief is small at first, just recognizing I'm not doing anything wrong. And sometimes simply seeing the cause makes it easier to imagine that there are ways to soften the pressure. Not all at once, not perfectly, but over time. This week's action item is to name one recent situation where timing, not overspending, caused you stress. Thanks for listening to Money Clearly. And as always, hearing what's confusing helps me know what to cover in future episodes. In the next episode, we'll talk about why not everything that feels like an emergency is truly unexpected. Some costs show up again and again. They just arrive at inconvenient moments. We'll talk about irregular expenses and sinking funds, simple timing tools that reduce how often emergencies happen, and why that makes you less reliant on credit. New episodes come out weekly. And until next time, take care of your money so it can take care of you. This podcast is for educational purposes only and isn't financial advice. Always consider your own situation or talk to a qualified professional before making financial decisions.